it's time to talk about Marko Rodin. And today I was trying to come up with an introduction that was fitting for this gentleman, and I didn't know exactly how to introduce him, so I decided what I would do is just use an introduction based on something that somebody else wrote about him. And the person who wrote the following is a guy whose name was Russell Blake, or is Russell Blake, and for about 12 years, I want to say 12, maybe 14 years, he was the senior research engineer at Microsoft. He was Bill Gates' guy. He's one of the magicians behind all the code that makes everything in all of our computers work. And he made an extraordinary statement about Marko Rodin's work. And I'm going to read it here really quickly, and then we'll bring Marko on the air. Here's how it goes. To whom it may concern, 2 years ago I met Marko Rodin through a mutual acquaintance. Mr. Rodin shared some of his results with me at that time. It became clear to me that Mr. Rodin's work was a synthesis of numerical patterns which had previously been overlooked by conventional science and mathematics. In hopes of bridging the gap between Mr. Rodin's discoveries and conventional science, I put forth an analytical framework in which mathematical formulae generate the numerical patterns of what is called the Rodin torus. These formulae suggest that the Rodin torus lies not just on the surface of the donut shape, but into the interior as well. In other words, the Rodin torus is three-dimensional. This mathematical formulation is as yet incomplete, and the physical meaning of these numerical phenomena remain unexplored still. Yet in my career, I have several times discovered new mathematical formulations which have led to new products. In the late 1970s, I discovered atomic modeling, which revolutionized computer performance modeling, measurement, and sizing. In the early 1990s, I discovered new ways to express the time-dependent behavior of program code, which led to reductions of program code size of 50% of the original for all programs to which it was applied. I mention these facts merely to convince the reader that my intuition has a history of success in the practical application of new mathematics. Now I am completely convinced that the Rodin torus will likewise lead to new and revolutionary advances in art and science. Mr. Rodin's work has suffered from a lack of adequate scientific attention, and I am sure that as the research momentum builds and the proper relationship between the Rodin torus and conventional science is fully understood, both areas of endeavor will attain new heights. I am very much looking forward to playing a role in this adventure. Now, these are the words of Russell Blake, a mathematical genius in his own right, highly regarding the gentleman who we're going to talk to right now. So without further delay, Marko Rodin, thanks very much for being on Radio Orbit, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me, Mike.
You're welcome. And, wow, amazing words from a guy like Russell Blake. Absolutely amazing.
Russell Blake is the author of the book Optimizing Windows NT, which was published by Microsoft Press. He's a celebrity wherever he travels internationally. Last time I spoke with him, he had moved to China because he was so famous and everybody knew him to continue his work.
Well, I couldn't think of a better way to introduce you than that, so that's what we did. So, Marko Rodin, here you are. Let's start out by talking a little bit about you, Marko. I want people to understand who you are, where you came from, and we'll even talk a little bit about where these ideas came from. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you came from and how you got along this path.
Okay. The best way, the most entertaining way to me to explain what I do is I'm interested in sounds. Sometimes it's referred to as resonance. When I was a little kid, I used to watch the old Tarzan movies with the kookaburra echoing, making the sound in the background.
Right.
And, of course, that is an Australian bird that didn't exist in Africa. But it sounded so good in the Tarzan movies that they added it for the effect. And when I was about, I think, 7 or so, I really can't remember, I learned how to make that sound so loud that you could hear it blocks away. I must have tore up the apartment building I lived in, because that's what I loved to do in our apartment, was make that sound. So I noticed that it affected my dreams, and it affected my energy levels. And I realized that the sound was tuning me. And that's when I realized that we aren't all created just as at a static state, that we all have potentials that can be affected by harmonics, by sounds. So,
yeah, look at what music does to people. I mean, that's the obvious example. It gets your feet tapping, gets your body moving. The right stuff makes you feel different ways, makes you react differently, no question about it.
In every historical source, harmonic sound, music is the most revered thing, especially in religion. In the Bible, the saying is that the keys of heaven are unlocked through the name of God. In the Torah, they didn't say the name of God, Adonai Eloheinu, because they didn't want to desecrate it. In every religion, if you learn the precise mystic intonation of the name of God, it teaches that you reach the apex of consciousness, that you get divine guidance.
Right. Yes. There's something about speaking the name or being able to know the true name of God, whatever that means. There's
so many complications to it. Sometimes they refer to it as the precise mystic intonation, Again, in all religions, it says that the name of God was created by the Word. And again,
right.
Most people having a background with the Bible, we always hear about the Word.
Let's clarify that, Marko, real fast, because for people out there who aren't familiar with the three Western religions, they basically all start the same way, and it basically says in the beginning was the Word,
and the Word,
and the Word was made flesh, right? So there's obviously something about sound, language, spoken word.
Well, it's been very hard on me, and it's tripped me up as far as the exertion I've had to make to understand the word, because it's obviously not W-O-R-D. What I discovered is that in Arabic, Hebrew, Persian, Aramaic, the word is represented by the letter Aleph, A-L-I-F, which is a straight line. I think everybody's somewhat familiar with the word Aleph, the term Aleph. So it turns out, and we always hear that Arabic can be a difficult language, or those languages can be difficult because the vowels aren't written. Well, what I discovered is that the saying is the Aleph is the seat for the Hamza. It turns out that the Aleph isn't even a vowel. The Aleph is a consonant. It's called the International Phonetic Symbol glottal stop. The saying is Aleph is the seat for the Hamza. The Hamza is a consonant, and then the vowels are diacritical marks, whether it's short A or broad A. So, so it isn't just that the mysticism was talking about the Word of God, but there was actually certain linguistics and phonetics. It was literally a science, an art.
Right. So there literally were sounds, spoken sounds, that if done correctly could access what?
I'm very certain on what it accesses. I believe that every one of us has an inherent potential to have communion with God, not just through prayer, although there's nothing greater than prayer, but also if you know the name of God, how to say it correctly. I believe that you actually can receive, through communion with God, you actually get inspiration, illumination. I work in coils. Okay, they made a coil, which I am named after, called the Rodin coil.
All right, let's talk a little bit about coils, first of all, for people who don't know, who never heard the word coil before. What's a coil?
Well, to start with, the ultimate coil is the human temple. That's why we're called the mortal coil. We've heard the saying, the mortal coil.
Yes, sure.
Okay. Our body's a coil. The ultimate, and coils do one of two things. I guess I'm closing it in a little bit, but they transmit and they receive. Okay? They can be an antenna. Okay? And the ultimate antenna to transmit and receive is the human brain, this mortal coil. And I believe that so my goal in life is to always be healthy enough, clean enough in diet and lifestyle to get inspiration, divine guidance. And I believe through the name of God is the ultimate source of inspiration and divine guidance. So those are my views. And maybe I couldn't have said it as eloquently as it could have been put.
Well, no, I mean, it shows that it comes from... Look, the bottom line is this, is that the mathematics behind this stuff speak for themselves.
Okay.
And that comes to it. But I want people to understand, that there is sort of a cross between science and mysticism here, because much of what you've discovered comes from, ancient mystic traditions, including, numerology and these ancient texts that have secrets encoded in them. And you have been able to uncover some of this stuff, and I just want people to understand a little bit of where it came from.
Well, you pretty much encapsulate it very excellently. Classically, and it's just so simple, we're always taught, at least the ones of us that are given a religious uprearing, if we have a problem, if we have a need, go to the Scriptures. The Scriptures always have your answers. And my field that I went to the Scriptures was it's a form of paranormal psychology. I'm going to seem like I'm insane.
No, go. We got plenty of time, so you just do it.
Well, my goal was to understand how to tap into the underutilized remaining 90% potential of the brain.
Right. They tell us we only use 10% plus or minus of the capacity of our brain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And we only know 10% of the universe, supposedly. Interesting correlation.
Probably a lot less than that, I would imagine.
Yeah, maybe like 0.01%.
Well, it's so vast. I believe the shape of the universe is a torus or a donut.
Okay.
So and there is no mathematics in conventional Western academia that can see over the event horizon of a black hole, and because the universe warps. But anyway, the math that I have discovered, which comes out of the Scriptures, explains that everything in its ultimate shape becomes that of a donut.
Which Scriptures?
I'm of a religion called Baha'i Faith.
Okay.
And there's a prophet called Baha'u'llah, and he revealed certain textbooks, the 7 Valleys and the 4 Valleys, the Hidden Words, the Book of Certitude. There's certain tablets, like, if anyone emailed me, I'd be glad to send them copies.
Yeah,
they can do a web search under Baha'i, B-A-H-A-I, Faith.
Right, it's not that obscure. Certainly there are people of the Baha'i Faith that are everywhere, certainly. So, okay,
But the other Baha'is, most Baha'is, in fact, I can say probably accurately that no Baha'i is familiar with the mathematics, the technology that's enshrined and encrypted within the Scriptures.
All right, so this is this is where the rubber hits the road. Is that these things are hidden, I guess, or occulted, inside these texts, and you were able to uncover it. And so
I always sometimes race, jumpstart things, but I'd like to say to the audience, if I can be so forward.
Please.
I don't make small claims about what I do. The most primitive electrical coil that I produced, actually other engineers made it on my behalf, just made in the most simplest environment, in a garage, laboratory workshop, homemade everything. This coil produced 60% greater output of the magnetic inductance. It was made by Bill Ramsey. Using these coils...
Who's Bill Ramsey?
He was introduced to me, I guess, in the early 92, 93, 94. And he was the only one at that time that I was willing to volunteer to take my schematics and blueprints as best he could approximate and make this coil that was wound in a completely different way than conventional electrical coils.
So the way they wind the copper for the coil was different.
Right.
Okay. And we'll get more into that later, no doubt. Okay.
And so if this coil was applied to motors, to different things, I actually believe that I'm able to harness an energy that's never been seen before. And I have endorsements from peer review from the different experts in the field saying that I've done just that.
Yeah,
I literally claim that I can obsolete petroleum, that I can obsolete nuclear power. And I shudder when we use the term nuclear power because it's a charade, because nuclear power isn't nuclear. Every nuclear reactor in the world is just a teapot. It's just used to boil water to create steam.
Right.
through the heat.
Right.
And so what I'm able to do is I've literally found an energy at the source of the nucleus of every atom that to quote one of the, he was the laser optics whiz kid of General Dynamics, the biggest weapons manufacturer in the world at the time. He said, his name was Tom Dawson, he said, I had discovered the source of the non-decaying spin of the electron. I have found an energy that is linear, that goes in a straight line, that doesn't bend, is irresistible, penetrates everything. It's the source of all motion, vibration, and time. And I can see it. And that's what makes my discovery so profound, is because there's nothing out there today that explains or can observe why everything curves and warps.
Right, and the mathematics that you've come up with do exactly that.
Right.
All right, and we're going to talk about that as we get further into the program. All right, so let's back up just a minute here, okay? We have not only Russell Blake, but we've got other people that you've been working with for a long, long time. Some of this stuff goes back. The most early report that I read about you was 1989, and that was there was some biological implications that had to do with a doctor or an oncologist in Germany, maybe.
Dr. Hans Nieper.
Okay, tell us about that, because that was 17 years ago. So you've obviously been working on this stuff for a long, long time.
The first place that I ever published was in 1988.
Okay.
At Aerospace America. It was the United States.
Big aerospace conference.
The biggest in the history of the U.S.
Yes, I remember.
You do?
Yeah. I've been interested in this stuff for a long time, and I was sort of a big UFO buff even as I was a teenager, and I followed the aerospace developments and the industry and the news pretty closely. But at any rate, tell us about it.
Very few people remember it. Well, I was selected. In charge of the presentations was the editor, James Martin, the editor of Defense Science magazine.
Mm-hmm.
My paper was titled Low-Cost Propulsion Based Upon the Reevaluation of the Physics of Matter. He hosted me. He was very kind. He put me under the topic of power and propulsion systems, which is the heart of aerospace.
Damn right it is.
So that was the first. Without me going too deep into that at this moment, in 1989, I wanted my work to be applied to medicine. And I was able to jump from one category topic to another because, actually one of the hardest discoveries I ever made was in that topic of medicine. I published in the biggest genetic engineering conference in the world. It was called International Biotechnological Exposition in San Mateo. They were kind enough to let me do a poster presentation at their conference, and they published me in their proceedings. Mm-hmm. What you mentioned, Rupert Sheldrake, at the opening. I
love Rupert.
Well, Rupert postulates the existence of what is referred to as a morphogenetic field.
Mm-hmm.
Am I saying it correctly? Morphogenetic?
Yeah, the morphogenetic field, exactly.
Okay. I can see it, I know where it is, and I can harness it.
And for people out there who want a quick nutshell description of that, what Rupert basically argues is that organisms, biology in general, has sort of a genetic memory, and that traits, genes, and many, many different things that are characteristics of all these different species are literally inherited along a sort of a resonant field that exists outside of space-time. Maybe, we could talk about Bell non-locality or something like that, but maybe that's not worth getting into.
It isn't even that hard, but that's exactly right. It's an invisible higher-dimensional flux field.
Right. Okay. So continue with your comments about Rupert. Well,
so he's noted as one of the predictors of that. There was just in the courts, and they lost the battle. The topic was intelligent design.
Huh, yeah. Lots of talk about that all over the country right now.
Another term for either morphogenetic field or intelligent design is also bioetheric template. Etheric is spelled AETHERIC.
Okay. Bioetheric template.
Yeah.
Okay.
So using this map that I discovered, I'm able to see inside the major groove of DNA. In fact, when I initially made the discovery, I went to the University of California in La Jolla, San Diego, California.
Mm-hmm.
It took like 6 months for the person there it was to meet with me. He was their new technology transfer specialist. And I shared with him my discoveries on DNA, that the major groove of DNA is not hollow or empty. And
what do they say? Nature abhors a vacuum.
That's it. Well, not only is there a higher dimensional flux field in DNA, but it's responsible for the helical anatomical structure of DNA. It controls all cleavage and receptor sites in the molecules of DNA, and it is responsible for all information encryption that takes place in mitosis during DNA duplication, sister strand duplication.
Right.
His response was, well, we know DNA is made out of phosphates, and all phosphates have a negative electric charge, so he said, of course there's going to be an associated magnetic field with any negative electric charge. The difference is inside this magnetic field, I am able to observe at the center. We have electricity, and in the center of electricity we have magnetism. Magnetism goes to center. In the center of magnetism, I have found a flux, F-L-U-X.
Mm-hmm.
Why I call it a flux field, because only magnetism can respond instantaneously, simultaneously fast enough to give slippage and free play to this flux. You could call it spirit, prana, chi. Sometimes it's called dark matter.
Ether.
Sometimes it's called ether. Was believed to exist, and then after I won't go into the history of it, but you're probably familiar with it. It was the Mendelssohn experiment, the 1920s.
Yeah. Which was really not a very valid experiment, in my opinion.
Well, Einstein's response was, that's where for the audience, they measured the drag of the Earth through space and said that there was nothing resisting it. So they said, and prior to that, most of our great-great-grandparents believed in what was called the lumiferious ether, that the universe had this invisible ether. When they used to do radio shows in the early 1900s, they used to say, this show's coming to you over the ether waves.
Right. And it was just sort of this general sort of sea that everything floated in.
And so when they came to the conclusion it didn't exist, of course I wasn't there, but it is refuted that Einstein said, the only other choice is that it's an inertia ether. And that's what I believe, and that's exactly true. It's an ether that emanates from the center of the nucleus of every atom. You call it spirit, we call it dark energy, dark matter, call it tachyon, monopole. Maxwell postulated postulated a particle that symmetrized all his electrical equations. He referred to it as the monopole. It's real. So when I wind these coils, even though they barely approximate the schematics that I require, they still produce tremendous output, greater output, because this discovery has such a huge margin of tolerance that no matter how much you only approximate it or abuse it, it still works.
Wow. All right. Well, look, we're at 25 after the hour, so that's a good place to take a little break here. We'll do that. We'll come back, and we will talk more about the mathematics. I want to talk a little bit about just where these ideas came from. We'll look at the sequences, and we'll talk a little bit about some of these diagrams that are on the website, okay?
I will add that when we go into the mathematics next, and I will enjoy it. A roller coaster ride for your audience, but I'm game.
Well, we'll
I'm going to keep it very simple. Everyone thinks that what I do is hard. The truth is, it's on the level of an elementary school child.
I agree, and as I go through the website, there is a visual component to it that I wish that people could be able to see, but I still think that it can be pretty reasonably described on the airwaves here. So we'll do it, and we will if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll move on to something else.
I'll follow your lead.
And we've got. And we're not going to get stuck on it. I mean, I think it's important to see where this stuff comes from, but I think it's as important to talk. This is Mike Hagan, and my guest is Marko Rodin. You can find information about Marko at www.rodinmath.com and also at rodinaerodynamics.org. All right, so Marko, we are going to attempt, I think here, at least for a few minutes, and see how it goes, to talk a little bit about the foundation of where the mathematics came from or comes from that was able to allow you to develop the coil, which is which has been the focus of our conversation for the last 15 minutes. Now, this coil, to reiterate, is something that has been tested, and it's a coil that is different than a typical coil, and it has to do with the way that the copper is wound. And I think people, and we'll talk more about it, but it has to do with the geometry, I guess, involved in the wind of the copper. Would that be accurate, Marko?
Yes.
Okay, so
the only secret ingredient is the geometry, is the winding, and the other, forgive the term, trick, is to know where not to put the copper, where you leave the spaces for it to, so to speak, respirate and breathe, where the magnetic underpinning nested vortices occur.
Right, these vortices that we'll talk about a little bit later here. So, sure. Okay, so we're working backwards, and I like that. We have this coil. We know that it's been tested. We know people have been astonished by what they've seen by it, and we know that it has been very rudimentary versions of the coil. In other words, they haven't been developed in a real accurate manner. In other words, you think it could be done a lot better.
I would incorporate a few features that would radically enhance it. One's called a changing aspect ratio. I could go on and on, but okay. I'll continue to listen.
All right, so we know this much. So now we're going to back up a little bit and say, okay, well, how did you figure out that we needed to wind the coil like the way we need to wind it? And now we get into this fundamental mathematical formula or sequence. It's something that you actually call the mathematical fingerprint of God. Right. And again, you make no small claims. And the simple fact about this is...
That's why there's an article by Russell Blake and other scientists. I'm very confrontational to my peers, and they have no choice but to dissect and eventually then prove my work's correct, because my claim is find one error and the whole work is trashed.
Right, right. And I mean, you're just laying it out there for everybody else's scrutiny. So, so far, it has it's been able to weather all of those tests. All right, so if we take a circle, and we take the numbers 1 through 9, and we equally space the numbers 1 through 9 around this circle with 9 at the top of the circle, and then going clockwise, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and again finishing with 9 up on top. So the 4 and the 5 are sort of on the bottom, both sort of straddling where the 6 position would be on a clock, and we have the 9 on top. All right, so this is how we start, right, Marko? And we've got equal sections of this circle. Is that correct?
I'm just listening.
Okay.
So far, you're doing great.
Okay, so
it's what you've done is you've just taken, instead of 12 digits around a circle, you've just made a 9-digit circle. 9's at the zenith. Essentially, 360 divided by 40 equals 9.
Okay, so we have 9 40-degree arcs, basically.
There you go.
That are cut out of the circle, and again, that's a great, Marko, that's a great description. Imagine that you have a clock, but it only has 9 numbers on it instead of 12, and the 9 is actually where the 12 would be, and then the 1 would be exactly where you would think it would be. So you start at the top with 9, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way around. Now from there, we start to connect the dots. And how do we connect the dots, and why do we connect them the way we're going to connect them, Marko?
Well, I'm still going to let you say you're doing so good.
Okay, so...
essentially, you're giving everybody... But if they do it right, they have essentially the key to the universe. Okay,
well, let's talk about this is the key to the universe, and it's not, I know that's a big cookie, and I'm not sure we want to take a bite out of it, but there are many people that are saying that so far they have not been able to find an example where Marko's work here does not fit. In other words, so far it has not been able to be determined that this is wrong, and that's basically the way that we test mathematical formulas in our world. So, all right, so we have this circle. It's split up into 9 equal arcs of 40 degrees each. If you start at the 1 position, and again, assume you're basically at 1 o'clock on a regular clock, and you go down to the 2 position, what you're doing is you're multiplying. Is that right, Marko? Everything here is a multiple.
Surprisingly, everybody makes that classic error, and it wouldn't be just you; it would be all of mankind. The truth is, and I'm not going to explain it, and it's going to throw everybody for a curveball.
Okay.
There is a complete difference between the multiplication series of 2 and doubling. doubling, D-O-U-B-L-I-N-G, of the number 1 is what we're doing here. We're essentially taking unity or 1. Everything begins and ends with the 1.
Right,
One
so
universe, one God. And I was able to discover that all the other numbers begin and return to 1.
Right, and doubling the number 1 is different than multiplying the number 1 by 2.
Correct. The axiom, just to throw it out on the table, of a multiplication series is that it's either a straight line or a circle, whereas doubling is a diagonal, it's a spiral, it's a vortex.
Okay.
The binary code is a spiral.
Okay, and that's what we're talking about here.
It's a vortex. Yes.
All right.
But we'll say 1 doubled is 2.
So from 1 to 2, then 2 doubled is 4.
Easy. We're just how all computers work, how the biology works, 4 cells, 8 cells,
exactly.
Or nuclear neutrinos. 1 neutrino liberates 2, liberates 4 in a chain reaction.
Okay, now what we're doing is we're tracing inside of this circle, all right? And
like light would bounce in an orb. That's how I conceived it when I first discovered it.
All right, that's a great metaphor, actually. How light would bounce around on the inside of a sphere or an orb. All right, so we go from 1 doubled is 2, 2 doubled is 4. So we skip over the 3 and we draw a line from the 2 to the 4 position. 4 doubled is 8. So now we draw a line all the way up to the upper left-hand corner where the 8 is. Now here's where it gets a little bit interesting. 8 doubled is 16. But now we're
everybody, that's where you're going to flunk, right?
No. Here's where we're going to make it real easy. What we're going to do is reduce everything that we have down to its root, and the way we do that is we just add up the numbers in the number itself. So we're just going to start by telling people how we do this. We said 2 times 2 doubled is 4, 4 doubled is 8, 8 doubled is 16. All right, there's not a 16 on our sphere here. So 16, if we reduce it, becomes 1 plus 6. We're going to add the numbers of the original number together.
So, Mike, playing devil's advocate, why would you want to have the number reduced to a single digit as opposed to having the whole number?
Well, that's a question for my guest. I think I'll have to ask my guest that. Marco, did you hear that question?
Yes, I did. Because what we do is we're looking for number patterns.
Okay.
And the thing is that the binary code has never been diagnosed as having any underpinning pattern to it.
Right.
Okay.
All right. So this is what we're trying to do, is we're trying to find this pattern, and we're gonna show them really quickly that it jumps out at us.
Okay.
So 8 doubled is 16. 16 reduced to its root is 1 plus 6, which is 7. So we draw a line now to our 7.
Russell Blake refers to that as a digital root.
A digital
Sometimes
root.
It's called also a digital parity. Sometimes it's called cross addition. Sometimes it's called horizontal math. How I learned it in elementary school, it was a quick check for arithmetic. It was called casting out 9.
You call it something else too, a discrete number, I think you call it.
Yeah.
Right?
It is a discrete number, 1 through 9.
1 through 9.
Because that's the decimal system. The decimal system has only 9 conditions in it, because the modular 9, the base 10 system is modular 9, because the number of any base is always one number less than the base, because 0 is not a number, it's a whole or an absence.
An absence of anything. 0 means nothing, basically.
Correct. Whereas the unique thing is that 9 times anything, or 9 never changes, it's always itself. It's complete, total, whole. Any multiple of 9 is always 9. 9, 18, reduced. 1 plus 8 equals 9, 27, 2 plus 7 is 9, 36, 45, 54, 63, 72, 81. 9 is never changing.
Let's clarify it again for people with that. 9 times any multiple of the number 9 will reduce down to 9 again. So
that's why it's the zenith at the top of the circle. It's the axis. 9 represents the axis. And the axis is the secret of, as Jimi Hendrix says, everything.
Yeah, Hendrix had, he wrote that amazing song, If 6 Were 9.
Right.
And he knew something was going on.
Axis fold is love.
Amazing. All right, so let's continue. So we have 16. Now 16 doubled is 32. If we reduce that, we take 3 plus 2, that equals 5. So now we go from down to the 5 position. Now the next thing we do...
So you drew a number from the 7, a straight line from the 7 to the 5.
Right. So far we've gone from the 1 to the 2 to the 4 to the 8, to the 7, and to the 5.
Correct.
And now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to take 64 and we're going to take 32, and 32 doubled is 64, and 64 reduces down to 6 plus 4, which is 10. 10 again reduces down to 1 plus 0, which takes us back to the 1. So that's our initial spot, right? So the sequence goes 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, and then back to 1. And the notion is that this repeats forever, correct?
It turns out that 64 is one complete cycle of infinity. In other words, it isn't because 8 times 8 is 64. It isn't because everything ends at 64 with the Mayan calendar in 2012. It's because 64 is the first. It's like pass and go on Monopoly. It is a bounded infinity. It's not infinity of direction. They think the binary code is a geometric progression. Forgive me, but they call it a combinatorial explosion because they don't even have computers that can do a septrillion today and calculate it like 2 to like the 40th. As far as being able to, they do it as a linear progression.
Okay.
I shouldn't say they don't, but how they do it is that they're unable to. It becomes an unwieldy large number. Whereas what I discovered is that the decimal system, like the universe, is a closed torus. It's a donut. And I discovered that. So when you go 64 doubled, what does it become?
128.
Which equals what?
1 plus 2 plus 8, which equals 11.
Correct.
Which equals 1 plus 1, which equals 2.
So you just went from 1 to 2 again. You repeated the cycle.
Okay.
And then what's 128 doubled?
Right. Then we have 256. 2 plus 5 is 7. Plus 6 is 13. 1 plus 3 is 4. So we're right back on track.
2 to 4. So what comes after 4, or 256 doubled?
What's that? 512. So that's 8. Then we have 1024, which is 7, et cetera, and it just goes on and on.
2048 is 14 is 5.
Right.
So it turns out that the binary code follows a path. This path is called, there is a scientific term for it. It's called the longest mean free pathway of least resistance. I'll say it again. The longest mean free pathway of least resistance.
Okay.
They look for that in producing energy. And that's the geometry that when I make my coils is why I get so much energy, because I found the way things move, anything moves, doesn't matter what you use. It can be any continuous medium. It can be electricity, it can be water, it can be the atmosphere. I'll give you an example. You see the vortex action everywhere. And right there you're looking at the binary code making a vortex. But I'll give you examples. Universe spirals, galaxies spiral in diskettes with the spiral arms of galaxies. You have in the atmosphere, you have tornadoes. Look at the Katrina with its huge, gigantic spiral arms. And that's made out of atmosphere.
Marco, let me ask you a question. You know, we haven't talked too much about the torus. That's what becomes implied from this mathematics. But the root of that, you mentioned the body earlier, and I think we need to go back there because that's where we sort of all begin. And we have this thing we call the torso. And in fact, if you even mix up the letters a little bit, you can get torus out of torso almost. But
I hate to say it, but you pulled my favorite comment. That's what I would have said. That's right. The human torso is based on the root word toroid, or torus, T-R-U-S.
And tornado, obviously, too.
There you go, or electrical torsion. So what I have discovered is I have found the mathematical pathway for all of that terms, or toroidal. It's called toroidal pinch. Now, the audience, nobody, unless you work in fusion, is going to know what I'm talking about when I say toroidal pinch. It's spelled T-O-R-O-I-D-A-L, pinch, P-I-N-C-H. I know how to make the perfect nozzle, the perfect toroidal aperture, or primal point of unity. That's my favorite term.
What do you mean? Try to put that into language that we can understand. Primal point of unity.
Essentially, it's the ID. It's the inner diameter of the torus. It's like a camera shutter. It's like an eye.
And this is the source of energy.
There is an emanation that comes from the inner diameter of the toroid that causes everything to move in the toroid to warp and process and curve to move back into the torus. In other words, a black hole is being driven. It is an incredible mechanical apparatus. And using these toroidal coils, there's pictures of my coil in my PDF on my website.
Yeah.
It's under the Rodin Solution Executive Summary, and there's a PDF that can be downloaded.
Yeah, it's like 60 pages long, and it's really in-depth and detailed, so I would encourage people to look at that.
The pictures was done by Jean-Louis Naudin of JLN Labs, and he energized my coil, and he took pictures that everybody said it was doing the impossible because it was making such a strong magnetic spiroinductance arms. And what's causing everything to spiral is this linear, non-bending emanation that emanates from the center that no one's been able to observe except with this mathematics, or tap into, except, again, using this geometry.
All right, now, and before, there are a couple other things I want to ask you about, because we touched on it earlier with regard to this. There's been an ongoing question, and one of the major questions that's been unanswered in physics has been the question of spin, and how is it maintained? I mean,
right.
the idea that that space is a vacuum is really a nebulous one. We know that space really isn't a vacuum, and we know that the space around an atom isn't a vacuum either. So there's at least a certain amount of resistance there. So why do electrons continue to spin and don't just run down, for example? Is this the answer to that, Marko? In other words, is this where that energy is derived from that keeps them going?
I'll take it one step further. If you were to take this energy away, the universe would instantly become destitute and void.
So it is. I mean, so in other words, the metaphor of God is a real one.
You could call it literally the light of the face of God. You could call it dark matter. You could call it spirit. You can call it a monopole. But the trick is that I figured out how to create a way to observe it. I call it, and it's a play on words, I call it a mathematical interferometry, or a mathematical diffraction grating. Can I go in a direction for a second?
Yeah, please.
There's a thing that I know we're speaking, and maybe, hopefully, a few college students are listening while they're maybe doing their homework or something.
Oh, I'm sure they are. Yeah.
Everybody takes for granted the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Heisenberg uncertainty principle is not all conclusive as everybody thinks.
Well, and let's clarify that real fast. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle basically said that you never really know where an electron is until you look at it.
If you know, that's right. Because if you know the present position, then you've affected it and you've deflected it from its future position, so you can't know any two positions simultaneously.
Okay.
I totally obsolete that. The basis of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle was that it was invasive, what you were observing it with, be it light in the electron microscope, and it would jump a valence ring because the electron absorbed that light. Right.
You actually had an effect on the experiment that you were observing.
The reason is because the mathematics used today, they didn't believe it was possible to predict absolutely anything, because the math today is made on a man-made contrivance, whereas the math that I use is based on absolutes. It's based on fixed constants, which do exist in the universe. So instead of using conventional mathematics, I've found literally, we've always said that mathematics is the language of God. I literally found the mathematical relationship where in this torus that I do, I piece numbers together in such a mosaic, such a jigsaw puzzle, that there is not one mathematical function or calculus known to man that isn't encompassed in this model. If nothing is omitted and there is no redundancy. If there was, the whole thing would be obsolete. That's why Russell Blake says that I have perfect mathematical coherence and regularity, that I have a perfect model on the 3D, and that's why he says then, of course, I'm able to go higher dimensional, 4D and up, and see the interior and volume of a torus. There's no mathematics today that is able to go on the z-axis like this mathematics can.
And by the z-axis, you mean by going internally inside that torus?
Correct.
Right. Whew, okay.
Because I discovered that numbers are real.
Right, in other words...
And nature is expressing herself with numbers. Nobody ever would have, in their wildest fantasy, ever attributed anything to numbers themselves.
Yeah, and let's talk about that a little bit, about numbers as things. In other words, we have, and you can talk about language a little bit and how that's involved in it. But what do you mean when you say numbers are real things that have a life of their own?
I discovered, and this is a little wordy if I haven't already been extremely wordy, that numbers are stationary vector interstices, that they're nodes. I found that the z-axis creates all numbers. Using the toroid map and mapping over the skin, we can take any number and we can map what I call harmonic cascadus. We're actually able to show all the properties of physics as they occur over this torus map, such as communicated agitation, waves. In other words, numbers were not fragments, disjointed, isolated from one another. Numbers weren't separate. I was able to take numbers, piece them together, and to a puzzle like a mosaic, and they make the entire picture of the panorama of the entire universe. That because everything's based on the same model, from ad infinitum to micro.
And again, it's the 6-number progression 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5 that literally everything else unfolds from that.
There's one other pattern. There's actually two.
Yes.
It's a little tricky to explain. There's the binary code 124875. That's polarized, so it has polarity. There's two. One goes in the opposite direction of the other. And then the other numerical pattern, which is very profound, which is probably the most significant, which is the 396693.
All right, and I think that is one that we will tackle in just a couple minutes at the top of the hour, okay? So let's do that, okay, Marko? We'll take a little break here, and we'll come back, and we will talk about this. Can
I throw a quick boomerang?
Sure.
You're always so accommodating, and I couldn't have a better host. I appreciate it.
No, I mean, that's the idea here is for you to have an open forum where you can lay this out as well as you can do in the time that we've got for you, because I know it's not always that easy, and I'm just trying to accommodate you. So.
Well, I like being pulled out on the carpet, and you did the doubling, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, which was 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 5. I just want to point out the perfection of it, that if you go backwards, a half of 1 is 0.5. A half of 0.5 is 0.25. 2 plus 5 is 7. Half of 0.25 is 1.125, which equals 8. Half of that is 0.0625, which is 13, equals 4. Half of that is 0.03125, which equals 11, which equals 2. In other words, it makes the same pattern no matter what. And as long as we're on that track, the powers of 10 have nothing to do with 10 fingers. They come from halving. We don't have 10 fingers because our thumbs are opposals. Each hand's a mirror. They have parity, bilateral symmetry. As you half is where the powers of 10 come from. Half of 1 is 5/10. Half of 0.25 is 25/100. And that's your 7. When you go to 8, half of 0.25 is 0.125, which is 8, and that's 125 thousandths. Half of 0.125 is 0.0625, which is 625 10,000ths.
Right, okay. So
every time you half, you increase to 0.
Right, so the point is up and down the scale, either way, you get the same phenomenon.
And using this system, which I've just very loosely laid out the foundation of together with you, I can create a 3D hologram operating system that obsoletes Microsoft, that obsoletes the NT XP operating system. I figured out that the binary code is not a flat 2D code, but is literally a hologram, and that's what the toroid is. It's the ultimate hologram.
All right. Let's take a breather, and we'll come back, and I want you to dig more into that because I'm not clear. But
my pleasure.
That's all right. We got time to talk about it. Marko Rodin. I love it. All right. This is Mike. You're listening to Radio Orbit. My guest is Marko Rodin. As I've said a couple times, get on the web, go over to his website. It will be very helpful if you can take a look at some of the imagery here. But it's not that complicated. It's, I mean, the biggest number we're talking about here is 9. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about 3, 6, and 9 and the significance of those three numbers on top of this 1, 2, 4. All right, my guest tonight is Marko Rodin. Information about Marko can be found directly through my site at mikehagan.com or also at his own place at rodinmath, RODINMATH.com, and also rodinaerodynamics.org. All right, we have had an hour with Marko, and we've talked about a lot of things, including a number sequence, 6 root numbers that we've learned that make up a binary code, and that what we're learning actually, I guess, Marko, is that the binary code, which we thought was infinite, is not infinite. It's actually a closed cycle. It's a loop. And 6 numbers, 6 root numbers, basically make up that loop. Is that correct?
There's a saying that Einstein supposedly said, that if you look out in the universe far enough, you see the back of your head.
That's right.
Because everything curves, everything warps, everything eventually will invert when it gets to the center. And even the binary code is, which is considered infinite. The definition of infinity by myself is not infinity of direction, but an infinity of duration. The binary code and infinity are the same, and it's an infinity of a spin continuum. It actually is a closed circuit
and
that
again,
never breaks.
Right, and this is the nature of a torus. This is the nature of the toroidal geometry.
Which is the same shape for the universe, for our planet. It's how galaxies, it's how everything purifies, renews, and cleans itself.
Yeah, and magnetic fields and all this. Even the magnetic fields that exist around human bodies and other life forms.
There you go.
Right. Okay, so
the classic human aura is in the shape, again, of a donut.
Of a torus, yeah. Okay, so we also know that you've actually made some real-world samples of a coil that was based on specifications that were sort of defined by the geometry that came out of the sequence. And we know that those coils were tested by people at Hewlett-Packard, that the output was 50% greater than would have been expected. 60%.
HP Materials Testing Division in Colorado gave me certified results. We sent them a Rodin coil and a control standard coil, and they confirmed that using the same form with the same amount of copper that the Rodin coil got 60% greater output.
Amazing. Okay, so we have this on top of endorsements from people like Russell Blake, etc. There are others for sure. And all right, so we're going to go from there. We talked about this circle.
May I say something?
Sure, please.
The first half of my life, even to my own family, who loves me very much, the standard saying is, you know, no one's going to discover anything new. It's certainly not you.
Right.
I've certainly been blessed that I could get my work evaluated by such impeccable people. And it certainly surprises me that they were so kind as to even put their own professional reputation and name on the line to endorse my work.
Yeah, I mean, half the time it's impossible just to get someone to spend the time to look at it, you know?
I've been very lucky. I've never had a problem. The doors have been open to me. When you go to the people at the highest echelon, they're very sincere to admit the limitations of their own Western capabilities of understanding and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And in their heart, everybody wants to see the breakthroughs come forward, and they know it's going to take something outrageous and from out of right field.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been, but I have the guts, I'll chase down the top people. So I've been very lucky. I used to barnstorm the dean of the departments at the university and stuff like that.
Well, I love it because you're also a guy who comes from a non-conventional background as far as education goes, and but again, in situations like yours, the proof is in the pudding, and there's not much they can say when you lay down the mathematics and let these guys look at it. So, all right, so there's another sequence that's as important or more important, Marko, and this is the 396-693 series. Let's talk about that a little bit and try to get as clear as we can on that, and then we'll talk a little bit more about implications and real-world applications of this stuff, all right?
Mm-hmm. The thing is you don't shy away from attempting to lead your audience into these more esoteric, complex things, and I commend you for your courage. The discovery, in essence, is this simple. Everybody thinks that the base 10 system is made of 9 numbers and that they're all the same system. it turns out that what I discovered is that 3, 9, and 6 are not a part of the 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. They're on two separate dimensions. They're two separate systems woven around each other helically. I mean, look at us. Everything in the world that we see physically, externally, is a coil. Why wouldn't even our numbers, if they had any connection to reality,
they would
also
be
a coil?
Right, and let me add something here, Marco. Again, when I was describing this circle and we were talking about tracing these lines from point to point, if people were observant or listening, they will recognize that we said 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, and then back to 1. Well, there are 9. Yeah, there are 9 numbers on the outside of this circle, and we never touch 3, we never touch 6, and we never touch 9. And so we're going to touch those now.
Well, the numbers 3 and 6 also end in the middle of nowhere on that circle. 3 ends on 3 and 6 ends on 6. It looks like a pyramid or a triangle that doesn't connect on the base.
What do you mean, if we do what to those numbers?
Well, if you look at them, when you did 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5,
right,
3 and 6 never connected horizontally. They only connect on the 9.
If we use the same doubling law, is that what you're talking about?
If you, on the symbol you drew,
okay,
when you went to 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5,
right,
3 connected with 9, and 6 connected with 9.
Yes.
But they never connected at the bottom.
Yeah. It's just a point looking upward with no base connecting the 6 and the 3.
And only 9 lines up over the center of infinity where the infinity overlaps and crosses over on the axis.
Yes. Yeah.
Turns out that the yin and yang is 3 and 6. Everybody thinks that the Chinese symbol, the yin and yang, represents duality. It doesn't. The minimum members of a set are 3.
The minimum numbers of any set.
Of any set. Even the binary code is not based on a duality. It's just, that has been everybody's mistake. I'm able to polarize the binary code. But before I go there, let's stick with the optical illusion of the yin and yang being a duality.
Okay, let's talk about that for a minute.
Okay.
And for people, again, the yin and yang, we're talking about this ancient Chinese symbol. It basically looks like a little white fish wrapped around a black fish, and they have a little S-shaped curve that separates the two sides of a circle. So.
Classically associated with martial arts or surfing.
Yeah, no doubt.
The 3 is the yin. The 6 is the yang. The definition of the yin and yang is that they must always equal only one or the other, that they must oscillate in a dance back and forth.
So let me ask you a question, though. It seems like a rather arbitrary selection of numbers. In other words, 3 for the yang, 6 for the yang. Why couldn't we just choose, 2 and 5? Or?
Well, I'll even take it further. I'm going to, since we've done doubling and we've done halving, and I'm defining... I define the qualities of 9 and 0. I'm going to define what I call fundamental physical property characteristics of all numbers. I'll go 1 through 8. But right now I'm going to stick with the 3 and 6.
Okay.
Because there's no other number than 3 and 6, if you double or half it, to answer your question, will equal the opposite other member.
Okay. So 3 times 2 is 6, 6 times 2 is 12, but the 12 again reduces 1 plus 2 equals 3.
24 is 6, 48 is 12 is 3.
Okay. That answers it. I got you.
These are axioms that can never be broken.
Yeah, it's a mathematical law.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So the 3 and 6 are yin and yang, but they never touch each other. They only connect with the number 9, the axis. The number 9 is the S curve in the yin and yang, in the center.
And this is where the trinary idea comes in as opposed to a binary one, because that's the third element.
It's the source and control. It's also referred to as a world boundary condition, which is relevant to cosmology and astrophysics, which is what this is all modeling, which is vortices. So whenever 9 is positive, that's the beauty of this math, is because I can determine motion. And positive and negative in this system is not based on the classic Cartesian coordinate system, which is erroneous, with positive at the top, negative at the bottom, or right, left, etc. But it's based on positive as a positive emanation coming from the center outwards, creating what is called negative draft counter space, or negative, which is going in towards the center. Because what I'm modeling, I call it the dandelion puff principle. It's a wild statement, but I don't mind putting myself way out there. Dandelion puff principle, because I'm modeling like fireworks, an emanation coming from the center out that creates negative draft counter space in. It's, again, we're talking about the primal source of every motion. So when 9's positive, 3 and 6 are both negative. And when 9's negative, 3 and 6 are both positive. It's the control.
And again, it just bounces back and forth.
The 3 and 6 are always... let's go to the binary code and add polarity to that.
Okay, in other words, so we're going to go back to our 124875 code.
Right.
Okay. What do you mean by adding polarity to it?
Well, I think before we took the brief pause, you asked me to come back and explain the hologram aspect
of
the binary code.
Right.
Okay. It turns out that when they use the binary code today, they do not add any polarity to it. Nothing's negative, nothing's positive. It's just it has no dimension.
Right, it's just this ongoing...
linear flip-flop on-off.
Right.
Okay. What I'm able to do is I'm able to add polarity to the binary code, such as beginning with 1, that'll be positive, 2 will be negative, 4 will be positive, and it never breaks the binary flip-flop rhythm.
All right.
So 8 will be negative, etc. So what happens is working with my colleagues, we were able to determine what we refer to as a binary triplet. Instead of it being binary, instead of it always being positive, negative, it breaks down that you always have, if it starts with a positive, you have a negative in the center and another positive. It'll always be based with a third element in the center. So it'll be 2 positives with a negative in the center or 2 negatives with a positive in the center. We call it a binary triplet.
Ah, yeah, okay, all right. And whichever the dominant one is, then that gives it the actual charge or whatever. So if you have 2 positives and a negative, that one has a positive charge.
The one in the center is always the source or control.
Right, okay, I'm with you.
But the point being is then with polarity, we're able to look at it in the form of a toroid, 3D, with the higher dimensional flux field spaces as well in between them, which is the 396, 693. We're able to create it as a dimensional object, as a geometric solid, as a coil. And I'm able to, because while everything looks as if it's a duality, positive and negative, it isn't. It's an optical illusion. You always have, the source of polarity is always in the center. You always have a cause. So I'm going to make a postulate here, put myself out there on the line. The classic saying is for every action there's equal opposite reaction. Completely false. For every action you have 2 instantaneous opposite reactions. In other words, it's like the binary tree ladder. What they do is you have 1 and they're not counting in the source in the center, the control.
Yeah, and I sort of see it on a personal basis too, where you have sort of both positive and negative results coming from any action. I mean, physical things that you do. In other words, if you're nice to somebody, well, you can have good and bad things come from everything that you do.
If everything was a duality, you'd have what's it called? Hemostasis. You wouldn't have motion.
Ah, yeah, homeostasis.
But instead, because everything's based on trinary,
that's why
everything ratchets. Everything only has a one-way positive systemic flow, which is forward. Everything is, forced to move forward.
Right.
And this work explains why.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the geometry that all of this stuff implies, and I want to ask you about what I guess is a key, one of the keys to this is this thing that we're calling, or that you title underlying nested vortices.
Correct.
So let's talk about this, because this becomes now, we're bringing it into the real world when we start to develop technology around this stuff, these vortices become a key to the whole thing. So why don't you talk a little bit about the coil and what underlying nested vortices are?
Okay. With the toroid, with the Rodin coil as a coil to produce energy, in between the two doubling circuits, because it's a bifiliar, it's a double wound coil.
And again, I want to clarify, the two doubling circuits that Marco is talking about are these two sequences. The first doubling circuit is 1248751, and the other one is the polarized.
Same sequence, but in reverse opposite polarity as well.
Right. Okay. All right. Go on.
Without trying to explain it, one point to clarify, without explaining it too deeply, everybody missed that in the binary code, it makes an undulating in reverse direction binary doubling code. That's why this work is complete. But I won't try and explain it, but it's very beautiful when you see how things, as it creates motion in one direction, the opposite direction also has literally a mirror motion. But anyway, that's why this pattern creates. See, when I first discovered this symbol, which we refer to as the mathematical fingerprint of God, I knew I was into something profound because the right and left was a perfect mirror. It was exhibiting bilateral symmetry, which is called parity.
Just like the human hand.
That's right.
Amazing.
Based on an axis.
Uh-huh.
Just like our eyes line up horizontally.
Oh, yeah.
Everything is based on, in our world of physical creation, on polarization, horizontal polarization. Sometimes we can see it in the stratification of things, or even the universe is said to be a disk. Our galaxy is said to be a sheet.
Right.
So I knew instantly I was looking at an energy that on this symbol, although it was invisible, that was creating this mirroring. Because you don't have parity by accident. You don't have mirror symmetry by accident. And forgive me, you've asked me to discuss the geometry of the manufacture of the coil. But before I do, since you did bring up the topic of the mathematics, and since we're now on the topic of mirroring, I want to complete one other aspect of mathematics.
Yeah, no problem.
Multiplication series are all mirrors. On that symbol, the 1 and 8 are the same geometric shape and the same distance from 9. To point out the mirror property of numbers, multiples of 1 ascend units of 1. It's the distance from 9 of 1. The mirror of that would be the multiples of 8, which is, again, the opposite direction 1 from 9. And multiples of 8, if it's a mirror of the number 1, must descend units of 1. So 1 8 equals 8. 2 times 8 equals 16, which equals 7.
Right.
8 minus 1 is 7. 7 minus 1 is going to be 6. And, of course, 3 times 8 is 24 is 6. 4 times 8 is 32 equals 5. 8 times 5 is 40 is 4. 48 is 12 is 3. 56 is 11 is 2. 64 is 10 is 1. 72 is 9. It's just descended 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 9.
Right, one digit at a time.
One digit at a time.
Mm-hmm.
There is an inherent phasing, okay, or a harmonic perfection mirroring between 1 and 8.
Now, what if we went between
2 and 7?
Yeah, 2 and 7.
Wow.
Same thing, huh?
2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. I got that from 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 is 2, 4, 6, 8, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. The last number before 9 was 7. The opposite mirror of 2 is 7. I call them polar number mates because they equal 9. Whatever equals 9 is going to be a mirror.
It'll be on the opposite side of the image.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
Of the axis.
Mm-hmm.
This is the secret of the axis. And multiples of 7. 7, 14, 21, 28, which is 7, 5, 3, 1. Then 35 is 8. It's just going to be 7, 5, 3, 1, 8, 6, 4, 2, 9.
All right.
Sending multiples of 2.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So this jigsaw puzzle, this mosaic of phasing and harmonics, no one ever assembled all the numbers together. And the torus on my website has different axes. Every axis, X, Y, and Z, is a different multiplication series intersecting. The reason Russell Blake said that I had the most advanced, he said I had 6 different axes intersecting any one number at any given instant,
right,
is because I discovered that all multiplication series are literally the underpinning geometry of the universe. That they literally are making that using multiplication series, you can see the invisible z-axis of spirit that creates the universe in the form of a donut.
Amazing.
So I just wanted to thank you for allowing me. Of course, 4 and 5 would have been mirrors too. But this is all a language. It is all a relationship that nobody ever took to the ad infinitum, effort that I was able to put into it to get it to understand what the final geometric shape was. Because that mathematical fingerprint of God is nothing more than a legend. It's like the most amount of information in the universe encrypted into the smallest amount of space.
Marko, there's something else. There's a word that's called, I think you call it enneagram or enneagram, E-N-N-E-A-G-R-A-M.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously this has to do with the number 9. But there's also in, some mystical traditions this idea of 9 entities or beings or something that go by the name of the Ennead. And I've had an opportunity in the past to research that a little bit, and it makes a whole lot more sense to me now. I mean, it's more simple than anything, quite honestly. I mean, everything unfolds from those 9 numbers.
I once did a work, and it's not well explained, but it is up on my website. I take the numbers off the torus counter-diagonal to the doubling circuits, which make a repeating pattern. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's 9, I think 2 and 7 are on the right and left of it. And you put those in a circle, and you connect the 1 to 2 to the 4 to the 8, and you make the enneagram.
And so there are just...
they're all the same, but different perspectives.
And every pattern that you can imagine.
And different involutions of one another. But everything converges and takes on is different perspectives or different relationships of a toroid.
Amazing. All right, so I think we'll not take a break. Let's just keep going. And let's talk about, back to the coil itself and the geometry and this idea of vortices and what do we call them? Underpinning nested vortices. And how does that pan out in the real world, and why is that so important?
Everything is controlled in biology, in all engineering and mechanics by underpinning nested vortices. When I was a kid, we grew up, we played golf, and all the golf balls were solid. A lot of people may not remember that. But there was no dimples based on tetrahedrons in different shapes. Okay? Yeah. And then somebody discovered that the lift and flight properties of a golf ball were affected by the dimples. Mm-hmm. The dimples are not well understood today as it applies to biology or to anything else. I know I think there were the Willis brothers. They made surfboards in the North Shore here in Hawaii. They called them phaser surfboards because they would put dimples on the bottom of them. Mm-hmm. But they're considered, not most surfers like them because they're way too fast. They're not able to grip and feel the wave. That makes the wave very slippery. I discovered with electricity that it is necessary for it creates in relationship to the magnetism the same type of underpinning nested vortices. And using this mathematics, I discovered that for a toroid coil to respirate its heat, to maintain its temperature, to work, to maintain its existence, that it creates underpinning nested vortices. Okay. And by the world boundary condition, by them being staggered, it creates that everything is focused at the center of the coil. One engineer refers to it as it rings.
And so again the mathematics and the grid. Well, there's an overlying grid that you can lay out over the torus. This defines how you wrap the coil in order to allow these underpinning nested vortices to occur.
And when you energize the coil, when you wind it based on two windings going in opposite directions when it's energized along the doubling circuits, I state that ideally it even has what is called a changing aspect ratio.
What does that mean?
Well, when you wind a toroid coil, you have big spaces at the outside, at the outer diameter, at the equator, and as you get towards the inside of the coil, you have everything bunched up. And the type of coil that I make, I actually take into account that electricity, that everything expands and contracts. It's based on the condensed matter physics, the inverse square law, that as you get closer to the axis, everything compresses, and as you get farther away from the axis, everything expands. So that property actually occurs in electricity, and that's what they don't weigh in today when they make coils, and that's why we have so much reluctance and friction.
Right, and we lose so much as heat or whatever.
What I did is I was able to figure out how coils, how electricity, where it's going to be, past, present, and future, the way that it wants to move naturally without forcing it. Again, that's called the longest mean free pathway of least resistance.
Right. Okay. So
I claim to make on a macro structure, on a large scale, a coil that has super efficiency without having to use superconductors.
Because this stuff defines the best way for electrons to move too.
That's right.
Right? In other words, it's no different than it defines the best way.
Micro to macro to micro, it works.
Right.
If you take the numbers over the toroid skin and you group them together like every seventh number, it makes the doubling circuits all over again. The harmonics of the toroid skin is so perfect. If you take any number in the center and you add the numbers around it, it always equals the number in the center because it makes waves of 9. It's modeling how everything is passing vibration, everything is working coherently with one another. So with DNA, I was astounded when I initially did the work to discover that the underpinning nested vortices are not askew, they're not staggered. When I was working with the double spiral helix, I was quite surprised to find that the boundaries, the world boundary conditions, line up perfectly so that they create opposing vortices. So nature uses the mechanism of these underpinning nested vortices completely different than it would be, so to speak, on a toroidal coil level. Everything, the nested vortices have unique applications depending on what the purposes are, whether it's to keep together and maintain a composed shape like the toroid, or instead to unravel or duplicate like in the helix.
Right.
And I found that information duplication occurs when the world boundary conditions in DNA are complete, when the world boundary conditions line up and are mirrored.
All right. It's outrageous. I mean, because, and I think what we need to do now is talk more about applications. And, I mean, what do you see being done with it? Let's just start talking about things that you see being done with this technology. Let's start with energy, man. I want to start with medicine. Okay, let's start with biology and medicine. And those are the two, medicine and energy. I mean, those are the things that are causing us the greatest amount of grief right now on this planet. So. Okay.
The reason I started with medicine is because everything's a two-sided sword. This discovery can go in different directions. So I'd like to always address the most worthwhile purpose, but I agree energy is a problem.
Well, I'm with you, though. Health is, and being able to cure disease is something I've been very interested in. You and I talked off the air earlier today, and we were speaking of Royal Raymond Rife, who is a hero of mine, and someone whose work I'd love to see.
The Rife machine, radionic device.
Yeah, and I just love to see him validified, and it doesn't mean through his work being revived, but through someone else showing, that these things are possible, and I think that's a potential here with your work. So,
I'd like to mention that he also was a member of the Baha'i faith like me. He had a Baha'i funeral. He lived in San Diego, which is also where I originally did most of my work.
Oh, interesting.
And I guess it's off the track of what we're talking. I had a friend there who was a graphic designer, and he was friends of John Crane, Royal Rice lab assistant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who he passed on. Who I guess either way, he ended up with all of Rice hardware and notes. And he went over to John Crane's house, and his whole house. I don't know if what happened. I think he went and he was in the hospital and he was sick. But anyway, he showed me the pictures. His whole house was gutted out.
Oh yeah, he took everything.
And he showed me. He gave me a copy of a picture of a napkin that Royal Rife was scribbling his notes on when he was in the restaurant waiting for dinner.
Yeah.
Discussing using how he was able to use the Rife microscope. Discussing how many atoms he could see inside the cancer cell.
Yeah, amazing.
And so I agree. There's been great scientists way before me, and that I don't even like being compared to.
Well, I mean, it's good. I mean, no doubt. I mean, it's great to recognize that there are great people that have come before you, but it doesn't mean that you can't be great too. And so, what you're doing builds on their work, and we can appreciate all of it, Marko.
Well, the biggest problem is they took their work to the grave with them, and I feel that I'm easily following in their footsteps. I'm trying to preserve my discovery. That's why I'm talking with you tonight. It exposes me to some risk. I've never had any big threat, but I figure I'm certainly rocking the ship. My goal is, and I would be glad to come to Missouri if anybody had a huge facility that I could use for me and my staff. Right now I'm working out of my home, and I have my computer. I have state-of-the-art Dell computers, fortunately, with dual NVIDIA graphics cards, dual processors. But my Macromedia director and Dreamweaver expert just quit because I couldn't afford to pay him. And we've been really cramped for space. He was working in my living room, so I've been trying to find a facility. I found one in Texas. It's about $250,000, but it's a huge 25,000 square foot facility, and I'm trying to find the money to buy it. Anyway, the applications of my work, the first work is on DNA. This work shows the secret of cellular communication. With it, I believe you can end any disease, produce unlimited food. The next application, let's go to energy.
Marko, and some of that work goes back, again, nearly 20 years. What about Jonas Salk? You told me to ask you about Jonas Salk, who I was a huge fan of.
Jonas Salk commented on my work, the paper I wrote, Quantum Mechanical State of DNA Sequencing, and said that it was so advanced he didn't think it would be understood in my lifetime unless I cloned myself.
There's another stunning endorsement from none other than Jonas Salk. Amazing. So, all right. So further on with applications.
Okay. Fusion, mirror symmetry coils for hot fusion. They try and create a magnetic bottle. The saying is he who controls magnetism controls the universe. I know the secret of magnetism. I know how it works. It's going to seem like I'm on a tangent, but I want to do right as best I can for you and the people who are listening. So,
first of all, we know that electricity and gravity and magnetism are all somehow related to one another. So does the magnetism thing wrap back into your code?
I'm able. The numbers 396693, the numbers 3 and 6 actually pinpoint the location of where the magnetic moment is at any given instant. I'm actually able to determine and tap into the magnetism, more magnetism than anybody's ever created. As even John Louise Nodden on JLN Labs uses my coil because I get so much magnetic field output. He refers to my coil as the proof of, again, this is a strong, most people won't know what I'm referring to, but it's the proof of the B field torsion effect of axiom fields. I know the secret of how to harness magnetism for space flight.
Right.
I obsolete the combustion engine. Okay? I create the ultimate perfect nozzle using a toroidal engine. And I can navigate it using these underpinning nested vortices because I understand their phasing. So I can use it to control it, to steer it. Should I go on?
Yeah, let's talk about this propulsion idea for a second, and clarify a little bit for me the idea of the nozzle and how you would be able to control the direction. I understand it's probably by somehow controlling the vortices and which ones are active.
You have a letter there from Dennis Watts from NASA. He is I'm not sure if he still is, he was in charge of communications for the International Space Station.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that my discovery can turn mankind into intergalactic citizens. I know the secret of how to create a vertical lift flying vehicle that has no pitch or yaw, it cannot crash, does not require wings. Essentially, the toroid-based, if you look at any bar magnet, you always have two poles, and you have the magnetic field compressing and decompressing at each pole. It's always based on a two-stage surge pump of compression, decompression, implosion, explosion, black hole to white hole.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's a nozzle. The ultimate nozzle in space, at the center of our Milky Way, is a black hole. Pretty much modern science nowadays, I'm certain they're not as ignorant as they were a few decades ago, recognizes that every black hole feeds at the other end a white hole. Every quasar, let's use a quasar an example as a white hole. Quasars are known to go billions of light years through the solar system, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Shooting hot, gaseous, nebular streams, billions of light years. Every quasar is fed on the other side. I mean, where does it come from? Where is this billions of light years of gaseous matter shooting out in a plume across space coming from? It's fed by a black hole on the other end. Okay? A black hole is a nozzle. Okay? Nothing ever whoever thinks a black hole is solid, a true dynamic black hole like in the center of our Milky Way is solid, is wrong. Nothing ever reaches the center of a black hole. All matter is deflected from the center. Everything must have a hole in the center. That's where the missing zero is. The zero is always the nozzle in the center. Okay? And everything goes around the hole in the center. It goes around the lip, just like a camera shutter.
Mm-hmm. An aperture. Yeah.
It's an aperture. That's referred to, again, as the inner diameter, ID. Short inner diameter. I call it the primal point of unity, or it's sometimes called a singularity. Sometimes it's called a, the vortex well.
Right. But but I think it's important to recognize again that this is something that we see on a fractal scale, though. We see it in a black hole on the big time macro scale, but as you mentioned, the same thing is happening at the center of an atom.
The saying is every atom is a miniature black hole, white hole. When they talk about electron moment or electron tunneling, everything when it reaches its maximum acceleration creates the vortex well, the funnel, the black hole to white hole effect. Be it a tornado, be it the Milky Way going through the black hole, be it an
electron spinning.
Be it a bar magnet, be it magnetism and electrical coils.
And basically what we've been talking about all night is you figuring out how to tap into that energy source.
Conventional mathematics today cannot create the mathematics to go into a black hole. Conventional mathematics today disintegrate and break down at the event horizon.
Right. That's why they call it a singularity, because it basically means that they can't define it past that point. So,
with this mathematics, not only can I go through the point of unity and come out the other side decompressing, but I know the pathway and how things invert as they pass through the center. And so I replicate that on a gross structure making coils, and it actually can, on the laboratory workbench desktop, create the same effect.
Amazing.
Essentially, it's a man-made black hole, white hole. It's a man-made artificial singularity. Because I don't have to use cryogenics. I don't have to use correcting magnets.
Right. I mean, it doesn't have to be absolute zero to get superconductivity. It's basically room temp or whatever.
So I want to go on a brief...
That's outrageous, Marko.
I want to go on a brief journey for 1 second. This is what I said I wanted to kind of go on a tangent before with. The purpose of magnetism to electricity is that it works as a heat sink. Today when we make supercomputers, we have to use refrigeration.
Right.
It's more important and more expensive than anything else.
Right, just keeping them cool, right.
That's right. Everything's based at maintaining a fixed constant. Our bodies, if we go 110 degrees, we incinerate. Mm-hmm. We die. Okay? It's no different for a black hole in the middle of our solar system. If it was to... What it does is it bathes itself with our planet. Eventually, we're going to be sucked into a black hole. Our mountains are going to be pulled, crushing flat. The seas are going to boil off in their beds. And we're going to be spun around faster and faster with other planets and other stars that have given off all their heat until we reach the singularity, where literally squeezed out of matter is this emanation, whatever we want to call it, spirit or dark energy, that don't bend, that are linear, and they drive the process. They keep it going, causing matter to curve and warp back in. And our Earth shoots out the other side of a white hole as hot, gaseous, interstellar matter, eventually to amalgamate, cool down, form, again, new planets and new people, and it's an eternal or endless cycle. That's why we say our bodies are made out of stardust, because we're made out of countless stars of the past.
Amazing,
And it's to take heat away from the core, from the center. And that's what the black hole is doing. It's maintaining a fixed, constant temperature of the solar system for itself. Everything has to maintain a constant temperature. So when I make these coils, I figured out the relationship of this, be it called spirit or flux or whatever you want to call it, to magnetism to electricity. And I literally use the coil's own higher dimensional flux fields to dissipate energy, to dissipate heat, to maintain it. And I can go on and on and on.
Wow, I love it. I mean, I love the fact that that you can go up and down the scale with it. That it's self-similar across all these scales. I mean, I think that it's just fascinating to me.
That's why I want to do I didn't even graph the fact that it's micro to macro, macro to micro, but certainly tonight I couldn't give the mathematical evidences of that by showing all the examples of the toroid skin and showing how it relates to the... I want to create a classic teaching curriculum for children on the elementary school level that explains that the multiplication table is not flat, but that it actually is warped and forms a donut. And then you're able to do all these mathematical evidences and proofs to see how all numbers are in relationship to other numbers, that they're all connected, that no number ever comes individually. And of course, it makes unity.
Wow, I mean, it's amazing work, Marko, and it's so cool, and it's also super important when it comes to the implications of it. I mean,
I'd obsolete Microsoft as an operating system. I'd perfect artificial intelligence because because it's a binary triplet, because there's polarities based on thirds. I'm able to add the third element to artificial intelligence. I obsolete crashes in airplanes because I'm harnessing the secret of the axis, which is, if you ever spin a top, it always goes upright the faster it spins.
Right, and I mean, the airplane itself then becomes obsolete with this technology. That's the thing.
All combustion engines are obsolete.
Right, I mean, everything changes, in other words. Basically, that's the nutshell, is that everything changes. I mean, the one thing that, people don't take into account enough is synergies between these things. And so what can people do? We've got 10 minutes. We've got 5 minutes, as a matter of fact. So certainly you need support. You're looking for a facility. You're looking for contacts. You're looking for...
I lost my webmaster, and the problem is I can't work with people from a distance. I have literally thousands and thousands of photos and test results and pictures and documentation of the things you're interested in, like micro to macro. I have to get this all up online. I've been doing it alone for a long time, and I've now accepted that I'm not making enough progress. My day-to-day life, I'm still just barely able to come up from air, and I do all my work already at the end of the day, and I'm just not getting enough done.
And you're in Hawaii.
Well, so I'm willing to move. I have a beautiful house on the beach. Like I said, there is a facility in Texas, but I'd go to Missouri. I'd go anywhere if I could afford to buy. The Texas facility is $250,000.
So what do you want to do with the facility? Do you want to build coils, or what would be the idea of a facility?
There's a lot of experts out there in your audience and worldwide that are more experienced and are master engineers that could build these coils.
Right. In other words, you've got the design specifications.
So the first thing is to preserve all the details of how it's made, how it's energized, and share that by putting it up on a website.
Right.
But to do all of that, I need to have a staff, and I just cannot do things living and working out of my house.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was trying to present and explain the work using Macromedia. The Macromedia suite is certainly an excellent suite. There's more advanced softwares like Maya or 3D Max, but really what I'm trying to explain could easily Director, Macromedia Flash. I'm just trying to preserve the work without getting too far difficult.
I want to say something, Marko, about that, actually, because it's something that we talked about off the air, too, and I want to commend you, first of all, because I know that there are many people who want to get their hands on this and want contractual agreements, etc., that might put you in a difficult situation or whatever, and I'm sure there's money involved that would probably put you in a better situation. But
I've been offered the moon. I've spoken with the Milken Institute. A lot of people want to use my work for financial market predictions. I don't...
Figures, that's what they see in it. Amazing.
They're sincere. I'm not angry at them. They live a different existence.
Right.
I mean, I rub shoulders with them, and I listen to them talk about, I lost $1 million here, let's do another $1 million there. Very wealthy people. They don't really understand that I'm just trying to share something, and I didn't do it because I'm trying to create a monopoly and blackmail everybody with new technology. They all want me to get patents and get exclusivity. That's not my lifestyle. I'll be lucky if I'm alive 10 or 20 years from now. I may not even be living even anywhere near that. The last thing I want to do is try and create what classically always happens, is to create a secret, proprietize it. So if any of the listeners was willing to buy a facility for me or had one, the reason I like the one in Texas is it was 25,000 square feet, and it had over 20, 30-plus offices and lived workspaces. So then I could have had a staff of computer programmers. Then, of course, we could be making prototypes. Of course, we'd have to be living there, too, me and my family.
And again, this is the reason why. In other words, the reason why you don't have a facility right now is not because the work doesn't deserve it. It's because you haven't been willing to basically sign it away. I mean, and this is what is required in order to get the money to do these things in most cases.
That's right. I'm not using the class. I believe in capitalism. I'm not going to slight the free enterprise market. Part of the problem is, and I'm certainly contradicting it by talking publicly about it, is I've been always very worried about being suppressed. I've never had it happen. But because I understand how this gives an advantage to whoever is in possession of it, I've been so precautious that I haven't been able to get it out there. So I've realized now that I gotta literally bite the bullet and do whatever it takes to rush to as fast and as quickly as I can preserve it. Any one of us never knows what is around the corner in our future, a car accident or anything. And I certainly want to see that this work survives and that I don't take it to the grave like other great scientists have on their discoveries. So that's why I'm sharing it with you tonight.
All right. Well, Marko, we're going to have to call it at that. It's a great way to finish things up. We will certainly do this again. It is ongoing work, and we're going to stay really close with you and in touch and try to share information and contacts and all this stuff. And we'll come back on the air and talk again. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It's amazing information.
I admire your courage for inviting my conversation on numbers, because I know how easily I must lose everybody.
Well, I mean, mathematics is a language all its own, and we have we have enough difficulty getting our point across with English, and mathematics isn't necessarily English, so it's not always easy. But the point is, you've got some real world things that can be put on a table and shown to people, and I just wanted to give as much background as we could on where those ideas came from. But the bottom line is we have real-world technology that needs to be investigated further and obviously looked at and implemented, because there are too many people that are looking at your work and are making amazing statements about it. So, as I said, I wish we had more time, but we'll do it again. And
I really appreciate your exposing me to the public.
Well, you're doing great work, and I commend Jeff Rentz for having you on his program a month or so ago, too, because some people heard that and then sent me a note and said he was fantastic, we'd like to hear more. So thanks to everybody who's involved in getting this information out, and that's what it takes, Marko, collaboration and working together. So we'll continue to try to do more of that. And, again, thank you so much, all right?